How a game plays is of course a crucial aspect of any experience, but quite often, and with increasing frequency these days, the story can be just as crucial, even more so, some might argue. There's no single way to tell a story in a game, but more often than not, games end up employing the most direct measure, and that means cutscenes. Often, that means a lot of cutscenes. Here, we're going to take a look at a few games that had more than their fair share of them. Metal Gear Solid 4: Guns of the Patriots. As always, we're going to kick things off with the obvious choice, because you all knew this game was going to be in here. Metal Gear Solid 4 has been notorious for its many and long cutscenes for as long as it's been around. The total length of cutscenes in the game is over 8 hours, which is longer than entire games can often be, and quite a few of those are ridiculously long. One particular infamous sequence stretches on for over 70 minutes. That's longer than a hockey game. Death Stranding. After Metal Gear Solid 4, Hideo Kojima overcorrected with the length of cutscenes in Metal Gear Solid 5, but with Death Stranding, he tried to strike a balance. And even though the open world structure did allow the game's cinematics to be much more spread out, combined, they clocked in at about the same total length as Metal Gear Solid 4. No single cutscene was quite as interminably long, of course, though they've gotten pretty damn long as the game approaches its conclusion. While many will argue that no single cutscene was particularly memorable either, but boy was there a metric ton of them. Crisis Core: Final Fantasy VII. Final Fantasy as a series has always put a great deal of emphasis on cinematic storytelling, and the PSP's Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII was no different. The game itself wasn't particularly long, but proportionate to that runtime, the total length of its cutscenes easily over 3 hours, if not even more, stacked up quite high. And yes, as is almost tradition for the series, quite a few of them were pretty long as well. The game's longest cinematic, for instance, is 23 minutes long, though in typical Final Fantasy fashion, those cutscenes are often bombastic, flashy affairs, and usually a treat for the eyes. Final Fantasy VII Remake. For the longest time, many feared that Final Fantasy VII Remake would end up stretching things out a bit too much, as it attempted to pad out its runtime even though it's only covering about the first 3 to 4 hours of the original FF7. That ended up not being the case. The Remake Saga's first installment had a meaty narrative of its own, and it told it throughout its runtime with typical, flashy cinematics. A lot of them with a cumulative runtime that's easily in the 7 to 8 hour range. Whether or not they will pay off depends on the Remake Saga's future installments, of course, but in here and now, we can at least say that we loved how ridiculously off the rails this game went on more than one occasion. The Last of Us Part 2.
After you took me out of the Firefly Hospital, you said there were dozens of people like me.
Yeah, that's what they told me.
I've never met another immune person before.
Naughty Dog has been synonymous with storytelling in video games for over a decade at this point, and on that front, and many others, The Last of Us Part 2 has to be among the studio's finest achievements. With several hours worth of cinematics, this is a game that isn't shy with presenting players with scripted, directed, non-gameplay sequences, but excellent direction, writing, acting, and pacing rarely ever make any of those cutscenes feel like they're overstaying their welcome. Yakuza Kiwami 2: Yakuza is another series that goes all in with its storytelling, and since its inception right up until this moment, this is a franchise that has been known for bombarding players with one cutscene after another, many of them surprisingly long, and yet it rarely ever feels like a problem, especially when they're as entertaining to watch as they are in Yakuza Kiwami 2. From excellent direction and storytelling to endearing characters, from riveting twists and turns to the peaks of the series' over-the-top cartoonish nature, Yakuza Kiwami 2 cinematics juggle humor and drama almost perfectly, and rarely ever miss the mark, even when they stretch on for over 20 minutes. Star Ocean: The Last Hope. Star Ocean: The Last Hope isn't a great game. In fact, it's a really rather forgettable game. Some might even say that it's a charitable description. But this is a game that loves to indulge itself, especially when it comes to its storytelling. One of the things that this game gets remembered for most often, perhaps the only thing, is its long cutscenes, with the longest one clocking in at over 45 minutes. The quality of these cinematics was inconsistent to say the very least, and it didn't help that the game quite often refused to put save points before or after them. Kingdom Hearts 3. Speaking of games that like to indulge themselves, that's one of the defining traits of Kingdom Hearts as a whole, and as the conclusion to the series' long-running and more than a little convoluted Dark Seeker saga, Kingdom Hearts 3 decided to embrace that. It went all in with the series' trademark's messy narrative and storytelling, which, depending on how invested you are in the series, was either one of its biggest strengths or biggest weaknesses. Thankfully, Kingdom Hearts 3 is a gorgeous game to look at, and though its dialogue and the way that it's delivered is often hilariously bad, at least from a visual perspective, its cinematics almost never failed to impress. Xeno Saga. The 3 Xeno Saga episodes collectively have nearly 500 cutscenes in total, which is a staggering number in and of itself. The longest of these cinematics, and there's plenty of long ones, is 25 minutes in length. Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Xenoblade Chronicles 2, even though it's separated from the Saga games by several years, has a story that is nuanced, and though it is quite often rather messily told, especially when it comes to some of its characters, the larger and most major story beats all tend to hit their mark. That, of course, makes the length of the game's cutscenes pretty tolerable, which is a good thing, because Xenoblade Chronicles 2's cinematics are numerous and lengthy. Its final cutscene, for instance, is over 23 minutes long. Add in the length of the credits and the post-credits scene, and that number gets stretched to roughly 33 minutes. Did you know? We at GamingBolt upload new videos every day. Stick around, drop a like, subscribe, and let us know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future with a comment below.